June 10th. Range of services under one roof that also include comprehensive rehabilitation, home health and home care, hospice care, and palliative care. Building upon its heritage, St. Barnabas continues to reach out to those in need and lives out its mission through individual and institutional services that help to promote the health and social needs by providing care with dignity, grace, and respect. Men and women are invited to join in the work of continuing Christian caring, healing, and teaching, and along with St. Barnabas, bear witness to its founder's reminder, God is able. We always welcome the opportunity to talk with community people who are making a positive impact in the greater Pittsburgh area. In keeping with our Memorial Day commemoration and recognition of those whom have served in the armed forces and have given the ultimate sacrifice in fighting for our country, we would be remiss if not mentioning that for some veterans and family members, the fight continues. I'm talking about the fight that comes with PTSDs, or the fight to remain connected, and those other battles that cause veterans to lose the fight to suicide. Please join me in welcoming Nicole Gallagher and Bree Piper from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Pittsburgh Veterans Administration. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming on with you. I know this isn't your area of expertise, being on the radio, so you're probably experiencing a little more stress than you would in your everyday lives, right?
This is true. We're both licensed clinical social workers.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, because this isn't a life or death process that we're going through here for the next 25 minutes or so. Just talking about what you know the best and how you help people. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Nicole, start with you.
Yes, my name is Nicole Gallagher. I grew up in Beaver County, so I am a hometown person in Vanport, and I actually graduated from BCCS. And today I live in the Pittsburgh area and have been working for the VA Pittsburgh for about a year, and previous worked about 5 years in Cleveland.
You miss Vanport, don't you? It's changed a lot since you left here. We built this massive construction down there called Shell. You could be looking out your back window and seeing it all.
When I visit my mother, I see it every time.
Bree, tell us about yourself.
My name is Bree Piper. I am from Westmoreland County. I grew up in Latrobe, live here in the city of Pittsburgh. I think I've been with VA Pittsburgh Healthcare System for about 7 years in different positions. A little bit more about my hometown or interest.
Sure.
True Yinzer at heart. Love all the sports. Pittsburgh's Steelers fan all the way.
Well, how about the Pirates? Pirates playing.
Pirates, Pens.
Pirates?
I'm a true Yinzer.
Okay. All right. You both had careers that required patience and understanding. Talk about what motivated you to get into suicide crisis prevention. That seems like it's got to be a very stressful profession to be in, because you're talking with people who may be teetering on the edge and family members who are trying to deal with people like this. Tell us about that stress and the motivation that made you get into this kind of work. Bree?
That's a really great question. I went to IUP and I studied criminology. I went on to Pitt to gain my master's in social work, and I specialized in the direct practice line or mental health line. Moving from grad school, I was working at Resolve Crisis Network out of the city of Pittsburgh, and I saw all different types of crises and individuals of all walks of life coming in with different struggles.
Mm-hmm.
I had then left there to enter VA Pittsburgh healthcare system, where I worked with the homeless. I worked in our emergency department. I served in a brief detail with the White House case mail, and now here in suicide prevention. And no matter the workplace or the job itself, I've always come across suicidality.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts everybody, of course, especially our veterans, but anybody and everybody can be at risk, and it's all of our business to care for our
What
neighbors.
is the White House case mail team? What does that mean?
So I was working under the Office of the Secretary with VA Central Office, helping to review incoming mail from veterans, VA staff, and or their family members. And I believe that they wanted somebody more clinical because a lot of the writings or correspondence had mentioned lethality. Whether it be suicidality or homicidality, mainly suicidality. And so I was able to then assess the letter and help to triage it and intervene by providing that warm handoff to the Veterans Crisis Line or to the appropriate VA healthcare system.
The ality thing. I don't think I've ever heard of it mentioned like that. Where does that come in? The suicidality, that sort of thing.
I guess it's just a broader term.
Okay.
It's just a broader term to capture suicide.
Okay. And Nicole, how did you get motivated to get into this line of work?
It just was very personal.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in emergency medical services as a paramedic. That's what my original education was in. And I was a paramedic for about 8 years. And for me, I worked with people in crisis in the moment and was, in the houses where people were having trouble or they had a suicide attempt. But then the broader picture was I saw my coworkers struggling with PTSD. I saw many die. And it just came to the point where I knew that I couldn't work anymore as a paramedic. And I went back to school and wanted to really tackle this issue of like, how can we help people that serve people? And, honestly, it's really fit into the VA and veterans because a lot of emergency services are veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's a very similar process of like not being able to do what you want to do and serve the way you want to serve and that transition back.
Yeah. As we're standing here talking, and I don't know if our listeners can hear it or not, but the sirens just went on outside the building. Ambulances or police cars going past the building here. Does that jolt your senses being in this line of work? Is that something you were in EMS, you work in health crisis, you hear that, does the adrenaline start pumping? Or no?
No, it does. And interestingly enough, we did a documentary last year, screening, and as a team, our suicide prevention team in Pittsburgh, and it talked about how like that cortisol that you have as a veteran, or the cortisol that you have even in EMS, where you get addicted to that, and so like it doesn't really go away. You just learn more how to manage it or how to transition that into other activities.
Yeah. Okay. Back in World War I. When veterans came home, because for a lot of them, the war is never over. The war zone never disappears. It's always in their mind. Back in those days, they didn't call it post-traumatic stress disorder. What did they call it?
Shell shock.
Shell shock.
Battle fatigue.
Battle fatigue, yeah. And we graduated to now post-traumatic stress disorder. Reason for that is because you could be going along doing fine, and then all of a sudden you get a flashback, or we just passed Memorial Day, so there weren't firecrackers and fireworks for that, but July 4th and all those other things. What is it that triggers something in a veteran's memory?
It's a great question. I think it could be many different things. As far as shell shock or that PTSD that they may experience in that combat zone or in war, some veterans might experience that then and there. Others may experience that as they transition back into the civilian world, where it's very different than when you're in active duty in a combat zone. But what we're seeing now, and research continues, but we're noticing a lot of PTSD symptoms aren't experienced sometimes until months, years later. And it could be the milestones in life that we're experiencing, especially as folks are aging and getting older, and they're looking more towards the end of life versus, beginning of their life, and contemplating their past experiences and coming to terms and peace with a lot of different situations that they've been in.
Why doesn't it happen to everyone? Whether you're an EMS and you're struggling with, because once the adrenaline starts rushing, you get into a zone and you do what you have to do. Your training is going to take over, but it's after the fact. And for military members as well, it's oftentimes after the fact that these memories come rushing back to you and you have to deal with them. But it doesn't happen to everyone.
I don't think that we have a good answer for that, because I think we don't know. I think that there is some research out there that mentions coping skills and learning early in life how to manage stress, or learning how to emotionally regulate, or be able to go from understand that anger is okay, but how to channel that into a positive way instead of becoming into the rage factor, like taking the anger to rage. But realistically, we don't know why some people experience it more than other people, or why some people have no symptoms.
Do we try and block it out? It is through evolution. Is that how we survive? Is that we're able to block some of this out?
Well, avoidance is not good either, though. Avoidance is actually one of the signs of PTSD. That's actually one of the first things they look for, is avoidance, and trying to not get the pain, because it's normal. We don't want to put our hand on the stove again. Yeah.
And you deal with people's families as well. The family members of these servicemen and women who are with these with their loved ones 24/7, and they have to know how to deal with that as well, don't they?
Yeah, the hidden heroes, right? The hidden heroes at home,
Okay.
Caretakers. I mean, they are doing as much as they can to support our veterans, but that's a job in and of itself, especially when trying to support somebody that's struggling with their mental health, with the PTSD, the depression, anxiety, drug and alcohol. There's a lot that goes into that alongside the providers. But hidden heroes at home definitely deserve that recognition for doing all that they're doing.
Yeah. And through the Veterans Administration, can you tell us a little bit about the VA and how and what the work is going on there, and with people going through these symptoms and these issues?
So VA Pittsburgh, I can just broadly state that we cover 13 counties over 3 states: Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia. We have outpatient clinics, we have vet centers, but with the main hospital out of Pittsburgh, so many different departments and programs that specialize in different treatment modalities or different programming to specifically support the specific needs of that veteran, whether it be mental health, drug and alcohol, women veteran, or women's health, LGBTQ plus treatment teams. I mean, we have it all. I think it's just sometimes trying to get that message out there.
And also it expands. It continues to expand and evolve. You talked about caretakers. We do now have an expanded caretaker program, as well as some different just more holistic approaches instead of the traditional hospital type of approaches.
We'd like to talk about more of what's available through the VA for our residents and the people in our listening audience. I've talked to veterans in the past, and they always talk about the good care that they get from the VA. There's just not enough of them. You either have to go to Pittsburgh, or you'd go to Butler, or maybe in Newcastle somewhere, and you're spread thin with the environment and the locations that you have and the people that you have to serve. We'll continue our conversation. We are talking with Bree Piper and Nicole Gallagher. Bree is a licensed clinical social worker, and Nicole has earned a master's in social work. They are each with the Pittsburgh VA Suicide Prevention Team. very challenging careers. And we'll continue the conversation and also give you some information as to how you can gain access to the VA. On the Best of Beaver County radio show, this is the St. Barnabas Radio Network.
Let's face it, work is a large part of your life.
Radio Network. I'm Mike Romai, and we continue our conversation with Bree Piper and Nicole Gallagher about the VA, about the social work that they do, about suicide prevention team that they are on. Very challenging. It's not something that we'd want to deal with on a daily basis, us normal citizens, regular citizens out here. Sometimes when you get into these emotional conversations with people, loved ones, or even strangers for that matter, we talk about avoidance, kind of get like, I'm not really the one that wants to deal with that. Is there somebody else you could talk to? So you specialize in this sort of thing. It's like you're going right into the line of fire with them, and you have to have the proper verbiage and skill set to be able to, and I don't want to sound fatalistic about this, but to talk them down from wherever they are. And if they're that close to suicide, I even hate to use the word, but that's the special skill set that you have learned that you can help them with. Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with it?
I think
if you get on the phone, let me simplify that. If you're on the phone with somebody, is that how you do it? Or you're called to somebody's house and you're sitting down and they say, I just can't do this anymore. I just, this is driving me crazy. The kids, the wife, the job, and I can't keep it together. Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm going to do.
So we, honestly, just to kind of bring it back, we can all do something.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that I learned how to do things the wrong way before I learned how to do things the right way, because I didn't have the adequate training when I started as a medic. And for me, it's about letting the pressure out of the balloon. So you're letting someone talk. The more someone talks, the safer they become. And that's something I learned working on a crisis line was the longer someone talks, the more that they start to understand things of what's going on, the more that you can find solutions, and the person themselves will find the solutions because they hear themselves talking.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk about we do a presentation called SAVE. Okay, so it's a suicide prevention training. It's called a gatekeeper training is the other term for it. And the civilian side, it's called QPR. We call it VA SAVE. SAVE is signs and symptoms, recognizing there's a problem, asking the question. That is the hardest part because I think people get nervous. And but just practicing and understanding it's going to be awkward, and it's okay to be awkward because you're there because you love that person. And then validation. That is the best skill. Making sure people understand that they are not crazy. They are not wrong. They are not flawed for feeling that the situation around them is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And once we can validate that human experience is difficult and that we all go through things that are just unmanageable sometimes, that's when you get that trust and you build that bridge. And that's where you get that safety. And then the last step is really expediting treatment. How do we get them help? Do we take them to the hospital? Do we call their therapist? Do we, do what we need to do? And honestly, us as clinicians use those same skills. So it's easy to sell something when you do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the skills.
And I was just going to roll off of that. I mean, just knowing we're all human, right? We're all human and life's hard. I'm sure we have listeners right now that have lost somebody to suicide. They may have even attempted suicide themselves. Nobody is exempt from suicidal thoughts. This can happen to anybody at any time, given life's curveballs, right? Mm-hmm. And so just knowing we're all human. We're all on the same level, just talking with one another and offering that trust, but that support, and just really, again,
Yeah.
opening up and welcoming their honesty.
And Nicole, you said keep them talking. As long as they're talking, you're moving in the right direction. But there are people who commit suicide who don't talk. There are people who loved ones never knew that this was something that was circulating in their brain. It just happens, and they're lost. The loved ones are lost, can't explain it. What happened? Why did it happen? Why didn't they talk to anybody?
And I think that's always the hard part. We always want to have the message that suicide can be preventable, but there are times we just don't know. We say that 135 people are affected from every person that has lost their life to suicide. So I think us as humans will sit there and go, what did I do wrong? What did I miss? But realistically, we're doing the best we can. And we're trying to exude kindness and love and support. And sometimes we're just not going to know. But we do also want to make sure that people are aware of the subtle signs and symptoms. I call them the yellow light things, the yellow light risks.
What are those?
So those would be like withdrawing. You see your neighbor and he's always outside gardening and then he's not doing that anymore. And you're like, well, what's going on? What's Jim doing? So, maybe reaching out and saying, hey, I noticed that, your roses aren't the way they were last year. How are you doing okay?
Mm-hmm.
Just, giving that invitation to say, hey, I noticed there's some things going on. Is there something that you want to talk about? Is there something I can do to help? Another thing is increasing alcohol use and drug use, anger and rage. Anger, irritability, like nothing can go right. People expressing hopeless thoughts, like everything, my life is over because I've retired, or my life is over because, I'm having a hard time taking care of myself. Those type of transitions are very high risk points, but those are typically the kind of things you'll hear. Like everything is just, not going to be the way that they used to be.
Once an individual has been diagnosed suicidal ideation, is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Then that kind of never goes away in a person's mind, or even maybe a loved one's mind, because you're always wondering, are you okay today? Are you sure you're okay? Because there are so many misconceptions about suicide that, sometimes you hear, they were really in a dark place for a long time and now they seem to be happy and it doesn't seem to be bothering. And you constantly ask, are you okay? Are you sure everything's okay? That's probably driving them crazy too. But then there are people who believe that when that happens and somebody seems to be all right and they're kind of joyful, that they finally come to the realization and they're going to make that next step. Does that happen? Or is that just something that we...
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. I mean, we do see our acutely suicidal patients or veterans or neighbors, right? But we also see our more chronic suicidal patients, friends, neighbors, whomever, right? Yeah. I think sometimes the treatment obviously can help, getting with the right provider, engaging in therapy, medications. But sometimes those acute suicidal ideations can come on from different situations, right? You're losing your house. You can't pay your bills. You're losing your job. You're getting a divorce. You lost a loved one. Those types of bigger yellow lights, I guess. Okay. Those can obviously trigger somebody to consider suicide. But if or when those might be resolved, those suicidal thoughts may then fade out.
Yeah, I saw the movie Otto. Did you guys see the movie Otto? It is Tom Hanks. He's attempting suicide in this. Sorry. I just gave away the ending there. No.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, there it is. Spoiler alert. I already did it. But so it's there, and he's putting a noose up and everything. And it's like, does that affect people who are in that line of thinking to see this on film or to see it? Does it give them ideas? Because we all, as a society, I know as a talk show host, people say, yeah, we shouldn't teach that because it gives them ideas. So when we see that sort of thing.
So it's kind of yes and no. Mm-hmm. Realistically, asking somebody about suicide does not create suicidal thoughts, because the person, if they're having those thoughts, they're already there. Mm-hmm. I will say that there is some research out there that certain things can trigger certain types of suicide attempts, such as like a lot of media coverage on a certain bridge. That may be something that can be a little bit on the reckless side, but really, realistically, like individual caring for another person and creating that connection is something that we know saves lives.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if we're doing something in an impersonal way, that can be something that can be triggering to some people. But also having suicide in the media and having those conversations that are respectful and validating can also reduce stigma and help the people ultimately as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of a complicated, nuanced answer.
Let's, as we get ready to conclude the program, let's talk about treatment and when a person needs to have treatment. When do they call the hotlines and get in touch with the VA?
At any point. At any point, 24/7, our emergency department's open. The Veterans Crisis Line, which is now 988, which definitely plays into part with normalizing.
988?
988.
Okay.
Yeah, it used to be the long number, but I think this movement is a part of normalizing and decreasing that stigma. That line is open for civilians and or obviously veterans if you press 1. But treatment is available 24/7. We can then assist getting in with a mental health provider or inpatient treatment, a same-day access clinic. Again, there's so many different options, but reaching out or having a loved one reach out on behalf of their veteran is also an option as well to encourage treatment.
And locally, we also have task forces that are also involved. So Beaver County actually has a really fantastic one called the Zero Suicide Task Force. And they also are working in the community to try to, decrease that stigma, but also allow people to know the 988 exists.
Okay. Keep that number in mind, 988. And this is for veterans? Family members of veterans?
For anybody, if you press 1, that would direct you to the Veterans Crisis Line.
Okay. All right. So there are a lot of issues out there that are putting stress, a lot of people dealing with anxiety and depression in our society, and people and those coming back from war zones or just under a lot of pressure. If maybe they're 5, 10, 15, 30 years out of the service, it still may be building in them. So we want to remind people 988 is that telephone number to reach out and ask for help, to get help. Medications, if you have a family member or a loved one who's not taking their medication anymore, how important is that? For the medications and for the medications to work on a normal basis. Sometimes they feel as though they don't need it anymore. They're feeling all right. But the triggers, you got to watch out for the triggers in all cases. And you can't be that family or loved one, even though they're under the similar stressors that, if it's going on again, you say, I can't take this anymore. You're driving me crazy, and they spaz out on that individual. They've got to remain calm. That's the training that you folks have, but not everybody has that.
Exactly. And I think with, again, all of us as civilians, we have enough life baggage, right? But I think for our veterans, they carry a little bit heavier of a pack because of what they may experience in the military. And just to add, we lose 17 veterans a day by suicide. 1 is too many.
Yeah.
11 of those 17 are engaged in VA healthcare. 6 are not. Those that are not engaged in VA healthcare, we're trying to really reach, Nicole and I, with our coalition and task force work. But those that are engaged in VA healthcare are not engaged in mental health care. They're mainly linked with their primary care.
Reach out. It's there for you.
Exactly.
VA healthcare. Nicole and Bree, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for the work that you do. Fantastic.
Of course.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for this
Thank you.
opportunity.
This is the Best of Beaver County radio show on the St. Barnabas Radio Network. I'm Mike Romai. We'll talk again next week. Be well and stay safe.